Hal E. Chester, the producer of the Underworld story, began his show business career as a child actor. Although he was born in Brooklyn as Harold Rabotsky, he acted under the name Hal E. Chester, starting with his portrayal of Dippy, one of the Dead End kids, in the Broadway production of Sidney Kingsley's hit play Dead End. He was replaced by Huntz Hall in the movie version, but Chester was signed by Warner's for the sequel, Crime School. And after that, he was a mainstay in films featuring the Little Tough Guys and the East End Kids. In 1945, the 24-year-old Chester convinced Monogram Pictures to let him produce movies, and the result was the long-running Joe Palooka series, which Hal E. Chester had brokered himself in a deal with Ham Fisher, the comic strip character's creator. It was on the Joe Palooka films that the newly christened Hal E. Chester began a professional relationship with writer-director Cy Enfield, which at least in its early days could be called magical. Enfield was a world-class sleight-of-hand magician, and Chester's first job had been as a magician's assistant. Sadly, things would sour between them. Enfield was blacklisted as a suspected communist and moved to England. He left behind several original scripts, which Chester ended up producing, without Enfield's name attached, of course. The best of these, 1955's Crash Out, is a sensational prison break picture I hope to someday show on Noir Alley. Chester followed Enfield to England to take advantage of tax incentives for U.S.-British co-productions. And in 1957, he produced Enfield's original script, Curse of the Demon, with Jacques Tourneur directing. Despite it becoming a horror classic, Enfield later called Chester his nemesis. Each enjoyed success in their adopted country, Chester producing a string of hit comedies, including the terrific School for Scoundrels in 1960, while Enfield made the film he's most known for, Zulu, in 1964, with Stanley Baker and Michael Caine. They worked together one more time as director and producer on a film called Hide and Seek, also from 1964. Enfield wasn't the only one involved in the Underworld story to be blacklisted. So was writer Henry Blankford and actor Howard Da Silva. Now, by the time he'd made this film, Da Silva was one of the busiest character actors in the business. He'd made a mark in noir, too, in The Blue Dahlia, They Live by Night, and Border Incident. But after 1951, Da Silva would vanish from movie screens for 11 years, until 1962, when director Frank Perry cast him in David and Lisa. And Gar Moore, who gave a suitably chilly performance as Clark Stanton, had an unusual road to Hollywood. He was performing in a Broadway play in 1946 when he was spotted by a talent scout working for Italian director Roberto Rossellini. Moore moved to Italy, where he acted in several films that were part of the country's neo-realist movement, including Rossellini's 1946 classic, Paisan. Now, with those credits under his belt, Moore moved to Hollywood, where he was immediately cast in Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff. He made a couple of other crime films, Johnny Stoolpigeon and Illegal Entry, but after the Underworld story, Moore mostly worked in TV. He retired in 1959 to devote himself to painting. Fine art, not houses. The original story for today's film is by Craig Rice, not a well-known name these days, but in 1946, Rice was popular enough to be the first mystery writer ever featured on the cover of Time magazine. That's right, Craig Rice was a woman, Georgiana Ann Randolph Craig, on her birth certificate, one of the best-selling mystery authors of her time, on par with Agatha Christie, Earl Stanley Gardner, and Rex Stout. Her specialty was the screwball mystery, as you can glean from some of her titles, Having Wonderful Crime, Home Sweet Homicide, and My Kingdom for a Hearse. A few of her books are in print today, but once she was called the Dorothy Parker of mystery fiction. Now remember to check in with us on the Noir Alley Facebook page and Twitter feed, and next week, Noir Alley will present another movie made by suspected communists. Ben Maddow and Irving Lerner are two of the eccentric talents behind the 1958 thriller Murder by Contract. Vince Edwards stars as a guy using murder as a fast track to the American dream. Martin Scorsese cites it as a major influence, and that is reason enough to set your alarms. See you next week.